Do you struggle to get your bass lines to sound big, full, rich and engaging? Well, that's all about to change. Stick around. Hey guys, Derby here, welcome back to the channel. A couple of months ago I did a video on the techniques that I use to come up with easy melody ideas. People really seem to like it. It's got close to 15,000 views. I'll link it up here if you want to check it out. But today what we're going to do is basically the bassline version of that video. I'm going to show you some easy, simple, but very powerful techniques that you can use to elevate your bassline from something kind of dull and boring to something really engaging, interesting and three-dimensional. If you like the track that's playing, it's a new one of mine on Bondage Music. There's a link in the description to Beatport and Spotify. Go check it out. As always, you can download the project files from this video. There's a link in the description to Patreon. Go over there, grab the files, check it out. Patreon's also a great way to support the channel. But for now, let's jump into Ableton and make some bass lines. Alright guys, so here we are inside Ableton. This is a little project that I've put together to demonstrate how we can take a really simple, bit boring bass line and turn it into something a bit more engaging, using some pretty simple but powerful techniques. So let's have a listen to what we've got. So, classic driving bass line. Very popular bass rhythm for underground club music. So I've got 4 techniques that I'm going to show you. Purposefully kept this beat pretty stripped back. It's just a few drums, mainly coming from my sample pack, Underground Shades of House. Link up here if you want to grab it. And I've got 4 techniques that I'm going to share with you that we can use to make this bass line a bit more interesting and a bit more engaging to the listener. So the first technique is going to be using octaves. So as you notice in this MIDI, all of these notes are happening on the same octave. What I'm actually going to do is loop around here and switch to this view, as I prefer this view for making variations on my elements. What I like to do when I'm experimenting with different options for bass lines or other instruments is start with my foundational rhythm, melody, and then I just duplicate, make a new version, duplicate, make a new version. That's the workflow that I use for just experimenting, coming up with ideas, being creative. So we're going to do that here. So what do I mean by octaves? This is all playing on F2. So all we're going to do is move some of these notes around. We can hold shift and press the up arrow and it will move it up a full octave. I'm just going to hit scale here and change it to F minor, so that's the key we're in, and I'll hit scale here. Now it's only going to show MIDI notes in the scale. So we could just try these up an octave. Okay, bring it back down, maybe this an octave, and this up an octave. So that already sounds a bit more interesting. It's kind of got an almost polyrhythmic type effect. Now what we could also do is take our original bass line and try adding in some additional notes that are using octaves. So maybe try this one here. Cool, that sounds pretty good actually. We could try also putting something in between here. This is going to give it more of like an acid type sound with that kind of quick 16th note bassline sound. We can also duplicate this, try some different variations over different bars, and that's going to give us like a longer progression and extend things out, keep it more interesting. What if we try this down? That's cool. I definitely recommend to experiment with octaves. It's one of the easiest ways that you can add some harmonic differentiation into your bass lines, creating a bit of tonal interest. And it's super simple. Anyone can do it. You literally need no music theory because we're just working with the root note of the track. So that's octaves. The next thing we're going to look at is using a chord progression to change the bass over time. Let me duplicate this and turn off the first one. And we've got our progression playing F. So the idea of this is that we're going to follow a chord progression. What a lot of people like to do is write a chord progression at the beginning of their track, even if it's not overtly used in that it's playing chords the whole time. You can use that chord progression to influence and define other harmonic elements of the track. That's a bit outside the scope of this video, but what we're going to do here is basically assume that we've written a chord progression and then our bass line is going to follow that. Let me show you. So let's duplicate this to 2 bars, duplicate again to 4 bars. Let's see our scale here, F minor, and this one I'm going to move up to the A flat or the G sharp, and this one I'm going to move down to the E flat or the D sharp. And let's take a listen. So very easy chord progression there. It does impart a lot more musicality onto the track, and the harmonics of the chord progression are going to influence the feel of the track. So this may work for some tracks, but may not for others. And of course there are a near infinite number of chord progressions that you could experiment with. The next technique we're going to look at is layering. So I've got a new MIDI track here called Layer. I'm going to just duplicate the MIDI down here, just holding Command and dragging it. This is the sound we've got. Just a sound from my sample pack. It could be anything. We just need to find something that works. But if we just layer this, the sound source is a little bit more interesting, but it's still just as repetitive. So what I like to do with layering is just to layer some selected notes. In this case, we might just layer this long note. So that creates emphasis on that. What we could also do here is make this into a chord. So if I bring this up to the C, this will be a power chord. It sounds like that bass note is already playing a chord, so let's have a look for a different sound source. Right, so if we were just playing the F, maybe let's try this up an octave. Now we can filter it out a little bit and just get it to fit. I like to take out any of the sub-region because we're just adding some harmonics and interest on top with that layer. We don't want to double it up. What we could also do is something like add a chorus to this. Add a bit of reverb and a bit of delay. Now we've done something pretty simple, but made a bass line that's a lot more interesting. We can also create variation in this, like maybe have this different. Or we could have this on a different octave. That's how I like to use layering. Now the last technique I'm going to show you is adding some kind of complementary sound. What I've got here is a deep subby bass. I really like this sound. I've actually used it in a few tracks. It's from my sample pack. Now what I'm going to do is copy down our original bass line. I'm going to turn those off. I just want them there as reference. So this one I'm going to play on F. And what I'm going to do is put a long note at the start. So let me turn off these bass lines. So that sounds pretty cool, but it's not really a bass line, it's just a bass note, okay? But what I'm going to do here, turn this one on and take off these notes. Maybe we'll have the second note on. So that really simple one additional note takes that bass line from kind of a 2D sound to a 3D sound. It's got so much more interest and texture in it. Now, of course, the real fun comes when we start to combine these techniques. So let's maybe grab this, duplicate it, and we can try bringing this one up an octave and turn on this layer. So we want to add some variation. When I'm duplicating this and creating variation, what I'm trying to do is create something that sounds the same but slightly different. So it's got continuity, but it remains interesting. Something like this would be basically exactly what I use in my tracks. Versus this. Night and day, right? As always, you can download these project files from Patreon. Jump over there, have a look. There's also the files from all of my videos, so there's a lot. Get in there and have a look around. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Simple, right? But the end result was really striking. As I said, the idea for this video came from one that I did on melodies. Check that out here. Well, that's it for me today. We'll catch you next time. Peace!